A few days later, Liana was organizing Kael's medication cabinet when she noticed he had missed 2 doses of his anti-inflammatory pills. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up the bottle and walked toward his study. She knocked gently. "Come in," his voice called from within. Kael was sitting by the window, the late afternoon light casting sharp angles across his face. He looked tired, more tired than she'd seen him before. "You forgot your meds," she said softly, holding out the bottle. He glanced at it, then at her. "I didn't forget." "Then why didn't you take them?" Kael didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared out the window for a long moment before replying, "Some days, it just doesn't feel worth the effort." His words struck her harder than she expected. She stepped closer. "But you still get up, you still work, you still fight." A faint smile touched the corner of his lips. "So do you." Silence settled between them again. But this time it was not heavy, it felt shared. Liana placed the bottle gently on the table beside him and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Stay, please." She froze, not out of fear, but surprise. He gestured to the chair across from him. Liana sat, her hands folded in her lap, unsure of what to do next. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Kael broke the silence. "I used to think pain made you stronger, that shutting people out made it easier. And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael looked at her then. Really looked at her. "Now I'm not so sure." The air between them shifted. Something unspoken stretched, thin but real. Liana didn't know what it was yet, but it was there. And for the first time since she entered this mansion, she didn't feel quite so invisible. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Liana realized something else had changed. Kael's loneliness didn't seem so unreachable anymore. And hers didn't feel so permanent. The next morning, Liana woke to the sound of soft knocking. She blinked against the early light filtering through her curtains and opened the door to find Mrs. Cora standing there with a curious smile. "Master Kael would like to have breakfast in the garden today. He asked if you could join him." Liana froze. "Join him?" "Yes, madam," Mrs. Cora said gently. "He asked for you specifically." An hour later, Liana found herself seated at a small round table beneath the shade of a flowering tree in the back garden. The air was cool, scented with dew and jasmine. Kael was already there, dressed in a simple gray sweater, his wheelchair angled toward the garden path. He didn't look up right away, just gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Sit." She obeyed, still unsure what this meant. Breakfast was already served: toast, eggs, coffee, fruit. Her stomach churned with nerves. "I thought it might be nice," Kael said finally, "to share a meal without it being silent or mechanical." Liana gave a small nod. "Thank you." They ate quietly at first, the clinking of cutlery filling the space. Then Kael broke the silence again. "You've lived with me for weeks, but I know nothing about you." Liana blinked. "There's not much to know." "That's not true," he said. "Everyone has a story." She hesitated, then looked down at her plate. "I used to have a garden when my mother was alive. We planted herbs, flowers, even tomatoes in the corner near the kitchen." Kael glanced toward the edge of his garden. "Do you miss it?" "Every day." There was a pause, longer this time. Then Kael spoke again, his voice quieter. "You can have a space here, if you want." Liana looked up, startled. "A garden?" He nodded. "You'll need help setting it up, but the grounds are large enough. Do whatever you want with it." For a moment, she couldn't find the words. No one had offered her something for herself in a long time. She saw no calculation in his eyes, no manipulation, just a gesture. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but soft. Kael gave a single nod and turned back to his coffee. Neither of them smiled, but something passed between them, an understanding, a shift. It was still distant, still unsure, but it was real. The garden became her refuge. Over the next few days, Liana spent her mornings mapping out a small patch near the east wall, where the sun fell most of the day. With Mrs. Cora's help and a quiet nod of approval from Kael, she arranged for soil, tools, and seedlings to be brought in. She didn't ask for anything extravagant, just basil, mint, rosemary, a few marigolds and zinnias. The smell of the earth on her hands reminded her of afternoons with her mother, kneeling in the dirt, laughing under the sun. It was the first time she had touched something that belonged to her. Not in years, but perhaps ever. Kael watched from a distance. From his study window, from the terrace, or sometimes in silence during his therapy sessions in the garden. He didn't interfere, but she could feel his presence. One afternoon, as she was planting the last row of rosemary, he approached. The soft sound of wheels over gravel made her glance up. He was wearing his usual dark shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a folder resting on his lap. "You've made good progress," he said. Liana wiped her hands on her skirt and stood. "It's not much, but it feels right." He glanced at the patch of green. "It suits you." They stood in silence again, the scent of fresh soil and mint between them. Then Kael surprised her. "I used to draw," he said suddenly. "Before the accident, I was good at it. Technical things mostly, buildings, blueprints. But sometimes I sketched people." Liana looked at him, waiting. "I haven't picked up a pencil since the crash. I thought maybe if I stopped everything that reminded me of before, it would hurt less." "And did it?" she asked softly. "No," he said simply. Her hand instinctively reached down and tugged a weed from the soil. "Maybe some things are meant to come back." Kael studied her, the quiet conviction in her voice, the dirt under her fingernails, the way she still stood straight despite everything. "Maybe," he murmured. That night, when Liana returned to her room, there was a small, unopened box on her bed. Inside, wrapped in soft tissue paper, was a fresh set of sketching pencils and a leather-bound pad. There was no note, but she knew exactly who it was from. The sketch pad sat untouched on Kael's desk for 2 days. He passed it every morning, glanced at it every night. He told himself it didn't matter, that it was just a gesture. But deep down, something in him stirred each time his eyes landed on it. A memory. A version of himself he had locked away. On the third evening, he found himself alone in his study long after midnight. The house was silent. Only the distant hum of security lights filled the air. Kael wheeled closer to the desk, his fingers hovering over the cover of the sketchpad. Then quietly he opened it. He picked up a pencil and held it like it might break. The weight was familiar, the motion instinctive. Without thinking, his hand moved. Lines, shadows, a curve of a cheek, a delicate jaw. When he finally stopped, the faint outline of Liana's face looked back at him from the page. Not perfect, not polished, but real, soft, almost peaceful. He stared at it for a long time, then closed the book gently and leaned back. His chest ached in a way he hadn't felt in years, not from pain, but from remembering what it was like to feel. The next morning, Liana was tending to her garden when Kael appeared beside her. "You were up late," she said, noticing the faint shadows under his eyes. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he handed her something, a folded sheet of paper. She opened it carefully. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a sketch of her, sitting just like she was now, sunlight in her hair, her hands resting in the soil. It was simple but tender, honest. "I didn't know you remembered my face that well," she whispered. Kael shrugged. "I see you." That sentence undid her more than any gift or praise. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her, not as a burden, not as a servant, not as a means to an end, just her. She folded the sketch carefully and held it to her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with quiet emotion. Kael didn't speak again. He didn't need to, because that morning, in the soft light of a new day, something between them had changed, silently, surely, and forever. But not all days were soft. The next week brought a shift. Kael became distant again, sharper, colder. He canceled breakfast, missed therapy, locked himself in his study for hours. Liana noticed the change instantly. She didn't ask. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew that pushing would only make him retreat further. Instead, she waited. She watered her plants, arranged books in the library, folded linens with shaking hands she tried to keep steady. Late one night, she passed by the study and saw the light still on. She paused at the door, hesitating. Then gently she knocked. "Go away," his voice snapped, harsh and unlike the Kael she had come to know. She stepped back, her heart stinging. But before she could leave, the door opened. He sat in the shadows, eyes rimmed with fatigue and frustration. "I'm sorry," he said, softer. "I didn't mean that." "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, eyes hollow. "The pain's worse lately. The doctor said it might get harder, that there's a chance I'll lose more mobility." Liana moved toward him slowly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," she said firmly. "It's care." That silenced him. For a moment, Kael looked away. "I don't know how to let someone care for me," he admitted. Liana knelt beside his chair, her hand resting gently on his arm. "Then let me be the first." The words hung between them, simple and devastating. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. Later, as she helped him into bed, his hand brushed hers, briefly, unintentionally, but that single touch lingered in the quiet between them. That night, neither of them slept much. Because caring was dangerous, it made everything real. And for two broken people who had only known survival, real was the scariest thing of all. In the days that followed, something subtle shifted. Kael no longer shut her out. He still kept his distance in public, still wore the same stern expression when speaking to staff or taking calls. But in the quiet hours, early mornings in the garden, late nights in the library, he let her in. Liana didn't ask for more. She simply showed up. She brought him tea without being asked. She sat with him in silence while he read. She massaged his shoulders when the tension grew too tight across his back. These were small things, but in a house filled with cold marble and distant echoes, they felt monumental. One evening, a sudden summer storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled through the halls, and the heavy rain beat against the windows. Liana had just finished drying her hair when the lights flickered and went out. The mansion fell into darkness. She grabbed a flashlight from the hallway drawer and instinctively made her way to Kael's room. He was sitting in bed, the glow from his phone casting shadows across his face. "Power's out," she said gently. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said automatically. But she noticed the slight tremble in his hand, the tension in his jaw. She walked over and placed the flashlight on the nightstand. "Do you want me to stay until it comes back?" Kael hesitated, then nodded. She pulled the chair closer to his bed and sat quietly. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, there was only the hum of their breath. After a long pause, Kael spoke. "Storms used to calm me. Now they just remind me how little I control." Liana looked at him. "Maybe that's why we need someone else nearby, to remind us we're not alone in it." He didn't respond, but a few moments later his hand moved across the bedspread, slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers brushed against hers. Liana didn't move away. They sat like that, hand to hand, until the lights flickered back on. Neither said a word, but neither let go. After the storm, Kael became quieter, but not distant. He observed more, listened more. He began noticing things he hadn't before. How Liana always hummed softly when she watered the herbs, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, how she never entered his space without knocking, even when he didn't hear her. It unsettled him. Because for the first time in years, Kael wasn't just surviving. He was feeling. One afternoon, he found her in the garden. Barefoot, dirt smudging the hem of her dress. Her hands were stained green, her cheeks flushed from the sun. She looked alive. She glanced up and smiled when she saw him. A real smile, gentle, open, unguarded, something twisted in his chest. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to see you." The words surprised them both. Liana blinked. "You wanted to?" He nodded slowly. "You calmed the noise in my head." Her expression softened. "Then come sit. The garden's quiet today." He let her help him settle on the bench beneath the tree. The scent of mint and jasmine floated between them. "I don't know how to do this," Kael admitted after a long silence. "Do what?" "This. Let someone close trust someone again." "You don't have to do it all at once," she said. "Just one small piece at a time." Kael turned to look at her, and for once he didn't hide what was in his eyes. Fear, longing, hope. "I'm afraid I'll ruin it," he said. "You won't," she whispered. "But even if you do, I won't walk away." Kael closed his eyes, breathed in deeply. The weight of her words settled over him like warmth he hadn't realized he was starving for. And though nothing had been promised, something had been given. Something real. That night, Liana found a book on her nightstand. It was old, its cover worn, but its spine carefully mended with tape. Inside, a pressed sprig of rosemary lay between the pages. A note was tucked just behind it, written in Kael's neat, precise handwriting. "You make things grow. Maybe now, so can I." She read it twice, her heart thudding softly against her ribs. It wasn't a confession, it wasn't even a promise. But it was more than enough. The next morning, Kael waited in the garden before she arrived. He wore a light sweater, a blanket over his lap. His hands rested quietly on the arms of his chair. When Liana approached, he didn't speak. He just reached toward the space beside him. An invitation. She sat down without hesitation. their shoulders nearly touching. They watched the breeze stir the leaves, the petals of the marigolds nodding gently in the sun. "I had a nightmare last night," Kael said suddenly. Liana looked over, surprised. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "Not really. But when I woke up, I thought of you, and it didn't feel so heavy." Liana didn't answer with words. She reached for his hand slowly, waiting for him to pull away. He didn't. His fingers curled around hers, firm and steady. For a long time they sat there like that, hand in hand, quiet, whole, if only for that moment. It wasn't love yet, but it was something brave, something new. And for two people who had once believed they were beyond healing, that was everything. Weeks turned into months. The mansion that once echoed with silence now carried softer sounds, footsteps in sync, quiet laughter in the halls, the gentle clink of shared cups of tea. Slowly, Kael and Liana built something between them, not rushed, not born of obligation, but real. The garden flourished, so did they. One golden morning, Kael wheeled himself into the courtyard where Liana was trimming back the mint. She looked up and smiled, brushing dirt from her fingers. "I was thinking," he said, pausing in front of her, "about the vows we never really made." She tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "We signed a contract, a business deal, but we never chose each other, not freely." Liana stood slowly, heart thudding. "And now?" Kael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, no diamonds, no grandeur, just sincerity. "This time," he said, voice steady but thick, "I want to ask properly." Liana's breath caught. He looked up at her, no longer the cold, guarded man she first met, but someone real, vulnerable, strong in a new way. "Liana Evans, will you marry me?" Her eyes brimmed with tears, not of sadness but of recognition. Of healing. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and she leaned down to kiss him, gently, fully, without hesitation. It was not a beginning born of tradition, but it was a beginning built on choice, on survival, on love, and this time it was forever.